Daniel chapter 4. King Nebuchadnezzar, to the nations and peoples of every language who live in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. It is my pleasure to tell you about the miraculous signs and wonders that the Most High God has performed for me. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom. His dominion endures from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace, contented and prosperous. I had a dream that made me afraid. As I was lying in bed, the images and visions that passed through my mind terrified me. So I commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be brought before me to interpret the dream for me. When the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners came, I told them the dream, but they could not interpret it for me. Finally, Daniel came into my presence, and I told him the dream. He is called Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, and the spirit of the holy gods is in him. I said, Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you. Here is my dream, interpret it for me. These are the visions I saw while lying in bed. I looked, and there before me stood a tree in the middle of the land. Its height was enormous. The tree grew large and strong, and its top touched the sky. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, and on it was food for all. Under it the wild animals found shelter, and the birds lived in its branches. From it every creature was fed. In the visions I saw while lying in bed, I looked, and there before me was a holy one, a messenger, coming down from heaven. He called in a loud voice, cut down the tree and trim off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it and the birds from its branches. But let the stump and its roots, bound with iron and bronze, remain in the ground, in the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals among the plants of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of an animal till 7 times pass by for him. The decision is announced by messengers. The holy ones declare the verdict, so that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth, and gives them to anyone he wishes, and sets over them the lowliest of people. This is a dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, had. Now, Belteshazzar, tell me what it means, for none of the wise men in the kingdom can interpret it for me. But you can, because the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Then Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, was greatly perplexed for a time, and his thoughts terrified him. So the king said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its meaning alarm you. Belteshazzar answered, my lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries. The tree you saw, which grew large and strong, with its top touching the sky, visible to the whole earth, with beautiful leaves and abundant fruit, providing food for all, giving shelter to the wild animals, and having nesting places in its branches for the birds. Your Majesty, you are the tree. You have become great and strong. Your greatness has grown until it reaches the sky, and your dominion extends to distant parts of the earth. Your Majesty saw a holy one, a messenger come down from heaven and saying, cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump bound with iron and bronze in the grass of the field while its roots remain in the ground. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven. Let him live with the wild animals until 7 times pass by for him. This is the interpretation, Your Majesty, and this is the decree the Most High has issued against my lord the king. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. The command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots means that your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. Therefore, Your Majesty, be pleased to accept my advice. Renounce your sins by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. It may be that then your prosperity will continue." All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. 12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, he said, "Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" Even as the words were on his lips, a voice came from heaven. "This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like an ox. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and give them to anyone he wishes." Immediately, what had been said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from people and ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes towards heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honoured and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" At the same time that my sanity was restored, my honour and splendour was returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and nobles sought me out, and I was restored to my throne and became even greater than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right and all his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble.
All right, good morning everyone, and it's good to see you all, and thank you Greg for such a great reading. Long reading, but it's not going to be a long sermon, don't worry. Let me ask you, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever kind of, at times, maybe occasionally, stepped back and just kind of looked at your own life and some of your achievements perhaps and thought, I've done pretty well. I've been fairly successful at some things. Look at some of the things I've accomplished. I wonder if you've ever done that. I can tell you there's been some occasional times in my life where, things have been going pretty well and where I've kind of proudly, at least to myself, thought pretty highly of maybe what I've achieved, of maybe my years of study or some of my ministries or my discipline or in my commitment to setting and to achieving certain goals. And I've kind of felt pretty good about myself. But I can also tell you that it's usually been at those times of pride that things have taken a turn, that setbacks have come, that I've been forced to take a really long, hard look at myself, that I've been humbled before God and before other people. But it's through that humbling, if I've responded to it rightly, that is, it's through that humbling, if I've responded rightly to it, that by God's grace I've been challenged and changed and I've grown as a Christian. And so I'm really thankful for those times of humbling. And I wonder, can you relate to that? Can you relate to what I've just shared and what I've just asked you? Well, in this chapter that we're looking at this morning, Daniel 4, this chapter reminds us of a very important truth, which, as Proverbs 16:18 puts it, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. And see, the Bible teaches in numerous places, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, that God opposes the proud. but gives grace to and exalts the humble, emphasising that pride precedes a downfall, while humility leads to honour. And here's some other examples from the Bible. So Proverbs 29:23. Pride brings a person low, but the lowly in spirit gain honour. In Matthew 23:12 and Luke 14:11, those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. James 4:6 and 1 Peter 5:5. God opposes the proud, but shows favour to the humble. And James 4:10, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. So you can see this recurrent theme. Now, okay, so turning to Daniel 4, where a dream really forms the centre of the action like it did in chapter 2. You see, King Nebuchadnezzar, he has this dream, and this dream, like, it torments him with doubt and with fear. And after his professional so-called wise men are unable to interpret it, he calls on Daniel, and he relates the contents of his dream to Daniel. Now, the main features of this dream are this huge tree, which provides sustenance and protection to the animals and the birds. And after describing the tree, the king narrates the appearance of a messenger who orders that this amazing tree be cut down. All that's to be left is its stump and roots, and an iron and bronze band is to be placed around the stump. And so while the tree's desolated, it's not to be killed, and its roots are not to be touched. Okay, now, well, in interpreting this dream, Daniel reveals that the tree in the dream symbolises King Nebuchadnezzar himself, who, being at the very centre of the Babylonian Empire, he's great and he's strong and he's a source of provision and protection to people. So he symbolises the tree, and the tree symbolises him. And since Nebuchadnezzar's that tree, Nebuchadnezzar's also the subject of the judgment that's announced in the dream. Why? Because Nebuchadnezzar was thinking far too highly of himself. He was thinking way too highly of himself. And because, you see, despite all of his greatness, Nebuchadnezzar is not God. The Most High God is God. God is God. And God is sovereign over all kingdoms. And so proud Nebuchadnezzar, he needed to be humbled. And now, for Nebuchadnezzar, what that meant for him, it meant, as the dream had announced, him living with the animals among the plants of the earth, and his mind being changed from that of a man to that of an animal. And that's precisely what happens, because in verse 28 we read, all this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. But as we see in verse 29, it doesn't happen immediately. Okay, this doesn't just happen straight away. It happens 12 months later. Because a year after the dream, Nebuchadnezzar, he's walking on the roof of his Babylonian palace, and he's probably got a view of the city from up there, and he marvels, at its grandeur, and he's boasting about his own mighty power and his own glorious majesty. Now remember, the king, the Babylon that King Nebuchadnezzar occupied, it was a grand city. It contained 2 of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, the Hanging Gardens and the city walls. Nebuchadnezzar, he was accomplished. He had great wealth. But he also had a much, much, much bigger problem. His power and his accomplishments led to his pride. A pride that It blinded him. A pride that led him to make all these great claims about himself. And so even after the stern warning that he'd received through this dream, even after that, a year later, he still says in verse 30, he says, "Is not this great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power for the glory of my majesty?" And so while God's given him a year, right, he's given him a year after this stern warning, this time, verse 31 says, "Even as the words were on his lips this time, a heavenly voice decrees his immediate judgment." And so, as per the earlier interpretation by Daniel of his dream, Nebuchadnezzar, he's cut down. Like the tree, Nebuchadnezzar is cut down. And he goes from being the most powerful man in the world to being driven away from people and living with and like the animals. And so verse 33 depicts his judgment like this: "He was driven away from people and ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird." And so away from people, he's exposed to the elements, he lives and he acts like an animal, and that naturally then leads to an animal-like appearance. Okay, now it's kind of hard. As I was reading this chapter and really thinking it through and trying to figure it out, and it's kind of hard not to read this and not picture something like Beauty and the Beast. But is this kind of the stuff of fairy tales? What actually happened to Nebuchadnezzar? What does this actually mean? Well, I can assure you this is not a fairy tale. What it is, it's an account of how God humbles this proud person. And so, you see, in Nebuchadnezzar's fall, he falls down the created order. He goes from being this universal kind of provider and protector, he goes to being someone who's really in need of provision and protection. And through this humbling experience, Nebuchadnezzar then, through being humbled, he changes his perspective about himself and about God. He comes to know that he can no longer be this proud and smug, kind of self-reliant guy. He comes to know that he's actually dependent and that he needs to be someone who looks up. He needs to look up. He needs to look to God. He needs to look to heaven. And thankfully he does through this experience, and that leads to his restoration. And so this divinely prescribed judgment, it works. It works. And at the appointed time, verse 34, we read Nebuchadnezzar, he raised his eyes toward heaven and his sanity was restored. And so he's looking up, he's looking toward heaven. It really meant him acknowledging that God is the one who is ultimately sovereign and powerful. It meant really that Nebuchadnezzar finally understood his own place as well in the big scheme of things, that while, he may have had some earthly power, he may have had earthly achievements, but whatever power he did have, whatever achievements he did have, they were a gift from God, from the all-powerful one, God. And so Nebuchadnezzar is restored. He's restored to his sanity, to his earthly grandeur as the king of Babylon, and most importantly, he's restored to he comes to a right perspective, a right response to God, a response of worship and of praise. And so, as we read a chapter like this, sometimes it's not all that easy to work it out and work out what's going on and the relevance to us. But what is the relevance of Daniel 4 to us today? Well, certainly verse 37, that everything God does is right. I had a conversation with someone just yesterday about this. They were asking me some questions about why this and why that, and really I had to come back to this point that everything God does is right. That all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. It's a story, you see, this is a story of God's goodness, of God's sovereignty, of God's power over all kingdoms and all kings and of all peoples on earth. And it's also a story of the danger of pride, the danger of human pride, something that resides in every single one of us. It's a very important, this is a very, very important lesson. It's a very important chapter for us. And there's also something else too in this story that we mustn't miss as we read and reflect on this. We need to really think about the contrast and the comparison between King Nebuchadnezzar and King Jesus. Because you see, in contrast to Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, who was a mere man, but who glorified himself as if he were a god, and so he is humbled through judgment. He unwillingly descends, you see, he unwillingly descends through being judged and being humbled from a king of Babylon to this kind of lowly beast. In contrast to King Nebuchadnezzar, Jesus, the King of Kings, who was in very nature God, humbled himself. He willingly descended, making himself nothing, taking the nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and who, being found in appearance as a man, was obedient to death, even death on a cross. And in comparison, you see, as Jesus' own humility was really the prelude to his exaltation to the highest place, to him having the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Well, Nebuchadnezzar, him being humbled, was the prelude to him being restored and to him rightly praising the King of Heaven. Verse 37. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of Heaven, because everything he does is right and all his ways are just. And so the lesson is learned. The lesson is learned. And the moral of the story really has the last word in this chapter. Verse 37. And those who walk in pride, God is able to humble. And so for us, let's heed this warning. Let's each of us continually heed this warning. Because you see, the danger of pride, it's real and it's ever present constantly for us. This danger of pride. As Christians, of course we can and hopefully we will experience and enjoy success. You know, in academia, in business, in sport, in the arts, in religion, in all kinds of ways. You know, hopefully we will enjoy success. But as we do, while we'll constantly be tempted, and we will constantly be tempted to kind of proud boastly. No, that's not the way to say it, is it? Not proud boastly, boastly proud. We'll be constantly tempted to be proudly boasting. Boast proudly. There you go. Thanks, Craig. While we'll be constantly tempted to do that and to claim, praise and glory for ourselves, let's instead, no matter what our accomplishments, no matter what, let us boast only in the Lord. Let us praise and exalt and glorify only the King of Heaven. And when we do fall into pride, because we're going to fall into times of pride, when we do, and then setbacks come, and we're forced to take that long look at ourselves, let's respond rightly. Let's welcome it. Let's be humbled before God and before people. And through that humbling and by responding rightly to it, by God's grace, as I can attest in my own life, you'll be challenged, yes, and you'll be changed, and you'll grow as a Christian to praise and exalt and to glorify God all the more. Amen.